The other thing to note as the players shake hands is both these players know each other. They know their play styles. They know their facial expressions even. These are not strangers playing each other. And it's another interesting storyline here. And Brandon, as we look at the cards in hand, I have to say we are underway in the first ever Disney Lorcana World Championship. It's Syed versus Frank Karsten. What do we see as they start their hand altar here, Brandon?
I couldn't be more excited for this first round of the Disney Lorcana World Championship. As I'm looking at both players' hands, we see Frank Karsten has a genie in hand, which would be a great turn 4 play. An evasive character lets you draw a card, replaces itself. I imagine both of these players are looking for some decent curve. It looks like Zan has a 2-drop in hand, a 3-drop, a 4-drop Bruni, which is an evasive character. Looking for these evasive characters. Pull the lever. Can be a really great card in this format as well, especially if you were able to find wrong lever as well. A little bit of extra card draw. Interested to see what we find here. Frank, it's 2 drops that he's considering putting back, I believe. Holding 2. We have a Jim Hawkins in hand. Not sure which of these piles he's keeping. And a Twin Fire, that's removal that you might need as well. Deal 1 damage to 2 characters.
A very popular card in this format, but we are going to send it away here. It is uninkable, so it restricts your options, a card that you hope to find maybe later on when your opponent's board's down a little wide.
And I think Zan is sending back 2 cards as well. I missed which ones they were, but I did see him draw into 2. And we are just underway. As soon as these players finish altering their hands and shuffling their deck, we are going to get into this first round of the Disney Lorcana World Championship.
And a little shout there from Lorcana in the background. Everybody here is very excited.
I wasn't sure who won the die roll.
We'll find out here shortly.
Couldn't see it earlier.
All right, both these players. We'll see Jim Hawkins there going to the inkwell for Frank. And no turn 1 play.
No turn 1 play. I am Liam, I don't think Super Sealed and you necessarily need a turn 1 play.
You don't. In Limited, it's less important. Oftentimes, a lot of players will say, so definitely going a little bit slower is totally fine.
Zan considering his options here, pulling forward a Sisu, maybe something to ink, an expensive character. Looks like we're not going with Sisu.
And we'll ink a card, pass back over. No answer from Zan. Back over to Frank.
Honey Lemon going into the inkwell. Not useful right now as there's no exerted characters that you could gain a lure for from Frank. But we are going to play a Helga Sinclair.
Great card on turn 2. It has a high willpower. It's going to be difficult to remove. It'll probably quest for a little bit of lure. But also offensive, can answer any bigger cards that Zan plays with its Challenger 3. It's also an anti-evasive character. We talked how important that stat is in this format. This is a card that will be able to answer early evasive characters. A great defensive play for Frank there early on.
Yeah, I feel like you see more of these evasive characters coming into this. This is turn 2 for Zan, but once you get into turn 3, turn 4, you can start throwing a lot of evasive characters out there. So doing anything to stop that would be good.
And a perfect example here. One of the things that might indicate Frank's game plan, we did see a number of high cost, like bombs, as I would describe them in this deck, cards that if you get them on the board, they're very difficult to remove, the Mufasa Among the Stars being one of them. So Frank, perhaps with a defensive game plan here, hoping to keep Zan from driving his lore total so he can get towards the later game and drop some of those bombs on the board. We have Shenzi on turn 3, a 2-3 evasive.
Again, we talk about how important these evasive characters are in the game, and Frank has this genie in hand to follow it up on turn 4 as well. If Frank is able to get a couple of evasive characters in play and Zan's not able to respond, he could take a really early lead, and it might be just enough for him to take this first game.
Well, again, that evasive starts to loom large here.
Orville coming down. 4-3. I don't think Orville has evasive unless a Bianca's in play, though.
Yeah, a card that can gain evasive. I'm not sure if he's running a Bianca in his deck. Something we'll be excited to see if Zan managed to scoop that up to get that advantage out of Orville. Nevertheless, it's a card that can answer Helga if Helga challenges or quests.
This is kind of the awkward scenario that we find ourselves in where Zan doesn't want to quest with something like Duchess because that Helga Sinclair can challenge it cleanly. Vanish, and we do see the genie come down from Frank Karsten here.
Fantastic turn 4 play. This is a card that's very, very powerful, even in core constructed formats. We saw it all over the place. So to find it in Limited is fantastic. It's evasive. It draws you a card. More importantly, it quests for 2 lore.
Yeah, I'm looking at Frank's hand. I'm just seeing a full hand of characters that either have evasive or have evasive on the start of their turn. I've caught a TikTok that's in there, which is a very big character that I believe has evasive on your turn.
That's true.
Looking at Zan's hand, we do have a Bruni that we could play soon that is evasive, but Bruni is only a 2/2, so not going to be super helpful against this 2/3 and 2/4 evasive character that Frank has on his side of the board.
Answering these evasives early will be super important. Let's see if Zan managed to find something to do with it, or perhaps if he has a sneaky Bianca in his hand. I haven't managed to see that'll allow him to unlock Orville there.
I think Frank deciding if he wants to quest with any characters this turn. Choosing maybe to quest with the Shinzi.
We have the first lore on stream of the Disney Lorcana World Championship. Frank going up to 1 with the Shenzi.
See if Frank passes over to Zan, and it looks like he will, keeping this Helga readied in case Zan decides to exert anything on the next turn. So we move over to Zan, he draws his card for turn. We'll see what he decides to play. Should have 4 ink to work with as well on this turn once he inks a card. Or Bernard. Okay, so Orville, if there's a Bianca or Bernard in play, then Orville can gain evasive.
And I'm not surprised these players are taking a lot of time to think through these turns. In Core Constructed, you know the script of your opponent's deck oftentimes, and you know the script of yours as well, and some of these turns become pretty routine. But here, Zan has to think about every single possibility, everything that he saw, and so taking time to think through what Frank's answers could be to some of his moves. And on his side, another Iago, fake Flamingo coming down. It's a 2/4 with evasive.
Another evasive character. We can definitely see that both of these players understood which cards were going to be most powerful in this format. But Zan can't do anything yet. Frank has built a very strong card. Oh, and a Luis. I think this is a really good card for Frank here, potentially. Luis, maybe not this turn, but when you play Luis, you choose a character, and they gain Reckless, and Luis enters Exerted, so you're essentially forcing your opponent to challenge into Luis with a character could cause them to banish one of their characters.
It's not removal, but it's sort of removal, or it can act as removal, but it also shuts down your opponent's questing. Perhaps there's characters like Iago, which if you quest with them, give you an ability, you can prevent that from happening by forcing Iago to spend his turn challenging instead. A pretty powerful card. It's become kind of popular in Core Constructed as well.
Yeah, it's just a way to disrupt your opponent, honestly. Even if it doesn't, banish anything, it exerts something, which can kind of start this series of events that you're looking for in locked up boards. So we are going to see Frank quest here with Genie and Shinzi going up to 4 lore, building a little bit of a bigger lead.
Ooh,
and playing that TikTok.
There's that 5-cost TikTok. Relentless Crocodile. He's hunting Captain Hook, and he's also getting evasive on your turn. Can he answer evasive threats? He has a big body at 5/6 in the 5 slot, a card that's difficult to remove with damage-based removal.
Yeah, we see the difficulty that Zan is having here, and that the evasives that he does have to play just don't have the stats like Frank Karsten has on his side of the board. Even just Frank Karsten's evasive characters through Genie and Shinzi, they aren't able to be banished by the evasive characters that Zan has available to him. And even if Frank wants to challenge one of Zan's exerted characters, he can challenge them with his characters like Helga and TikTok that can challenge evasive characters. But Iago is going to quest, which means that the next he can pay 2 less for the next action he plays this turn, so Zan's going to follow that up by a pull the lever, only having to pay 1 for it, deciding to draw 2 cards. It is a Genie that we see being drawn as well. A pretty strong evasive counter. Another one of those steel cards that has evasive on your turn.
Excellent play there. Yusuf pulled the lever, getting 2 cards for 1 ink. Fantastic value. Frank has managed to draw at least 1 card off the cards he's played, so Zan finding cards to keep his game going, really important. Fantastic play there.
Zan still has plenty of ink to work with on this turn. I think we can ink up to 4.
We have a few evasives available to play.
Looks like we're going to play that Genie, considering playing the Genie that we drew off of the pulled lever, and we are. That 3/4 Genie that can at least stop the Shinzi from questing. Or if we want to use the Iago and the Genie on the next turn, we could banish Frank Karsten's Genie Wish Fulfilled.
There's evasive after evasive. We see how important stability is in this format. Both players understanding the assignment here, loading their decks up with them, and a little bit of an evasive off.
Another difficult thing in this format is you start realizing that the boards start getting really big. And you have to start doing a lot of math in your head on, okay, if I exert this character, if I quest with this character, my opponent can challenge with these characters to make this trade. And you have to consider any removal or tricks they have in their hand that they can use to take advantage of that. It can get really difficult and get to sort of a locked board state where it's difficult for you to quest with your characters and make any lead. As we see both players have 4 characters out on board already.
Let's see, Frank thinking through his moves.
Wondering if Frank is thinking of challenging or questing here. As the Shinzi and Iago both have evasive, so they can challenge each other.
Will challenge into the Iago, it looks like.
Gonna put 2 damage on the Iago, and Shinzi takes 2 damage as well. Do we have a damage moving effect? We are going to see Panic being played, which means we can move the damage off of Shinzi, healing Shinzi and banishing Iago. These are where those combat tricks come into play, gaining tons of advantage.
Fantastically, that 2-3 stat line for Shenzi paying off here, shifting that damage over. We talk about, removal. Sometimes there's tricky removal, like in this instance, Panic here coming down, sliding those damage counters over. Fantastic play, and we talked about the board states building up. Frank now, his board looking quite a bit wider than Zan's, but back over to Zan for the response here in a second. As Frank will ink a Louise, we talked about the power of that card. Frank choosing to make it ink instead, building up his resources here for the endgame.
This is the critical point in these matches. Oh, okay, we do see a Hades being played. This is a bomb, as we talked about earlier, an uninkable 6-cost character that comes into play. When he is in play and your characters are banished on your opponent's turn, you gain 2 lore. So if Zan can get this Hades in play, then Zan might be able to start turning cards sideways if he thinks he can catch up with Frank Karsten. The issue in this scenario is that, as you can see, Frank Karsten has 5 characters on his side of the board, also has the way more lore than Zan does per character, with Genie having 2 lore, Panic having 2 lore as well. Also, you have really big characters like TikTok. It's fun to see Frank here exerting or having quested with TikTok on the last turn, because he's basically saying, look, you can challenge TikTok with any of your characters because TikTok doesn't have evasive on your turn, but any characters that you challenge TikTok with are likely going to be banished, and it's going to take you at least 2 unless you have some tricks up your sleeve to banish this card. So if you want to use some cards to get rid of my 5/6, you can. Otherwise, I'm going to quest with these evasive characters pretty safely.
Yeah, it just becomes kind of a math problem at this point when you start to add up the amount of willpower on Frank's side of the board. Some very high willpower characters for their ink slots. 6 plus 4 plus 3. That's a lot of willpower to deal with, and you total up the strength on your side, and it's not close to enough.
Zan taking some time here to do that math, consider cards in hand, figure out what it is we want to do on this turn, trying to catch back up, get a little bit more control over the board, because we need to clean up some of the stuff that Frank is doing. We see just how powerful these evasive characters are for Shinzi. Genie being able to quest essentially for free every turn. Shinzi could be challenged this turn by Zan's Genie. We are going to see the Pete enter the Inkwell. We're going to see a Bruni being played for 4.
Delightful little card, has evasive, and he replaces himself if he's banished. And a Megabot coming down. This item obviously enters play exerted. You can banish this item, choose one, banish a chosen item of your opponent's or yours, or banish chosen damaged character. So again, some tricky removal, something can be used to efficiently remove a big character. You talked about how difficult TikTok is to remove and challenge into, but Megabot's a card that can get it done.
Yeah, any form of interaction in Sealed is welcome. Megabot is one of those ways. We are going to see Genie challenge Shinzi. So Genie's going to take 2 damage counters, but at least get rid of one of those evasive characters for Frank. Frank is building up quite the lead, though. Oh, and that is a big card in Frank's hand. That's 7 cost. Might see him played on this turn. I believe we're at 6 ink for Frank, but we are getting a little bit low on cards. So we'd have to ink a card, play a card. That would only leave 1 in hand. But you're also putting another big character on board.
And we see that, as you pointed out, hand size starting to run, a little bit low. We ink a card, we play a card, unless you can start replacing them eventually. Your decisions become limited, your options become limited. Again, it's so tricky right now. Thinking, I mean, you know what's in your opponent's deck. You know, as the game goes on, they're likely to draw into cards that you're not hoping to see. So trying to figure out what the game plan is, what options your opponent has available, and then doing the math on this board state.
It gets really tricky. We see Frank picking up Helga here, deciding if we want to challenge Zan's Genie. Then, if we challenge Zan Genie with our Helga takes damage. That opens up Zan to challenge our Helga with something else. Potentially trying to decide how he wants to banish Genie on Zan's side of the board. Also knowing that Megabot is in play, it will be readied on Zan's turn, and so whatever character is damaged at the end of your turn, if you're Frank, Zan can use Megabot to banish Megabot and then banish the chosen damaged character. It makes making these trades a lot more difficult because you don't get as much value even if you survive the challenge. Looks like Frank is going to choose to challenge Zan's Genie with Helga Sinclair here.
She's a great challenger, not so great on the defense, but Frank valuing that trade there.
Zan going to push his lure, questing for 5, going all the way up to 12, past that halfway mark in this first game. At this point, Frank just has to keep playing cards, keeping cards healthy.
Things start to become tight at this point. Again, without a lot of direct removal, without cards that banish characters outright, specifically ready characters. If you get too close, if you allow your opponent to get too close to 20, all they need to do is play a character and let it sit ready and then quest next turn. Speaking of high-value questers, here's a character that quests for 3.
Yes.
It's Adia, Fang General, 7/7 quest for 3. Heavy, a lot of willpower there, very difficult to remove. A card that perhaps Zan now is calculating, hey, that Megabot would be awful nice to remove that Adia if it's vulnerable. But that character, though, likely to get a quest in that turn unless Zan has some sort of answer for it. It's going to get Frank even closer to victory. This is kind of a tough board state at this point.
Yeah, that's the things that Zan has to consider at this point, where he's like, okay, we have this big 7 cost 7/7 on the other side of the board. It's going to be difficult to get rid of with any challenges. He might have been looking to use this Megabot on this turn just by banishing a character and then using it to challenge. We do see that Bianca.
He had it. I wonder how long.
He has the Bianca, able to play it. Now Orville has evasive for the turn. We can finally get rid of this Genie that's been questing for 2 lore every turn since it was played. Now we can start to clean up pretty nicely for Zan.
Oh, that Bianca is so huge, unlocking that Orville's evasive ability, challenging into that Genie. That's a great trade. That Orville sitting there, kind of innocuous for most of the game, and finally being used to great effect here. Zan taking a turn to play that Bianca. Fantastic play. Back over to Frank. Frank still has 4 lore available. He'll be able to sneak in another 4, going up to 16, but the board state starts to look better. And look at that.
We do see the shiny card.
Oh, my goodness. And this is, if you were to script a card that you want to draw in the late game, like a 7-cost ending, well, this is where you want to draw it. It's the end of the game. You've accumulated your resources. You're looking for a closer. It's a brilliant card to draw here, and a shiny one to boot.
This card also has a ton of lore on it, by the way, which might be just enough to push him over the edge because, as you mentioned, we have 4 lore on board this turn. I think Frank has to make the decision of, okay, am I just going to start running and see if I can finish the race before Zan can come back or not? It looks like we are going to play this Arthur 3/6 with 3 lore, being able to give a character challenger and resist, can challenge ready characters on the turn as well. Looks like he's going to choose TikTok for that. But we'll see if TikTok challenges or quests. Arthur doesn't have quite enough lore to push us to victory if we just quested everything this turn, but it looks like we are going to quest. Gain 3 lore here for Frank, pushing him up to 15. We go to 16 with TikTok, and then if Zan isn't able to get rid of most of the stuff on this board.
Frank, taking a look here. Yeah, that's the decision. You banish, you go to 16, looking at the responses, doing the math. If anybody can do math in this game, it's Frank Karsten.
Yeah, I think Frank's trying to decide, okay, how can Zan get rid of this board currently? Is there something else to think about, with this Megabot in play, if there's a way that Zan can even move damage counters onto this Arthur, Zan could theoretically challenge. He can't get rid of everything just through challenging, but could do some damage, banish this Arthur before the Arthur even gets to quest.
At this point, as far as lore goes, either that Arthur or that Adia will do. We will quest with that TikTok, go to 16. That means we'll need to remove one of these 3 lore questers and the TikTok, or both 3 lore questers.
Yeah, Zan is still only at 1 lore. Doesn't look like we have a ton of interaction in hand either.
No, not a lot there that'll be able to help in this scenario. So we can let's do the math here. It's going to be a tough road. We can do it. We have enough to clean up everything there and leaving that Arthur up.
Yeah, with that Jasmine that Zan is holding in hand, when it's played, you can give an opponent Reckless on their next turn, opposing chosen character Reckless, so Zan could potentially play that Jasmine, give the Arthur Reckless so that Frank can't quest with it on the next turn at the very least.
Zan second his first move here, probably going to challenge with that Bruni. Bruni will give Zan a card when he's banished, so if Zan's looking for options here, we'll take a look at the top card of the deck, see if it gives you anything else to work with here in this turn.
Looks like we have a Jacques. That's not going to be helpful here. Jacques gains a burst of lore, 2 lore if you have 3 other characters in play, and although Zan needs the lore, he needs to get control of this board quickly for Frank, against Frank here.
That Jasmine, though, is going to be super helpful. We've done the first part. We'll see if we use this Megabot here or how we choose to clean up this Adia. And then I assume we're going to see that Jasmine here before too long.
It's pretty unfortunate either way. If we use the Megabot to banish the Adia, we still have to challenge with both Orville and Miss Bianca just to banish this TikTok this turn. Are we going to see this Jasmine played?
There's the Jasmine, and there he's indicating Reckless on that Arthur. It will have to challenge it. It cannot quest. It will have to challenge if it's able to this turn.
Frank taking a second to look at the card just to read it. Getting an understanding of what's happening. We're going to ink this Pete, play the Jacques, so we are going to gain this 2 lore.
Go for a wide board. Take it the lore while you're at it.
Now it's time to clean up. We're going to banish the Megabot so that we can banish the Adia.
And here's the other consideration here. We talked about how it's so important to remove, multiple characters off the board. But without Arthur being able to quest, now that TikTok becomes a little less important. We'll see if we choose to clean that up or just scoop up some lore here.
Yeah, now at this point, Frank can only quest with the TikTok next turn, so he can jump to 17, which does put him in game-winning range just with the Arthur, if the Arthur can survive another turn. It looks like Zan is just going to go ahead and quest with Orville and Miss Bianca here, trying to catch up on lore as best as he can, and he needs to quickly because we mentioned how it can be difficult to find cards to interact with your opponent, and we find a Gantu off the top for Frank here. Oh my goodness, if Arthur wasn't a problem, Gantu will be.
It's two 3-lore questers to deal with, and a hypnotic strength to boot.
We're going to give Challenger +2 to Arthur here and draw a card from this hypnotic strength because, like we mentioned, Arthur has Reckless from the Jasmine on last turn. So he's going to have to challenge if able anyway. Might as well use this hypnotic strength to make the most favorable challenge. We can banish the Bianca on this turn with Arthur, and we get to recycle the hypnotic strength when we use it.
Get an extra card, see what your other options are.
Did find a Mother Gothel off the top there.
Looks like Frank, considering the quest here, put himself within striking distance of one of these 3-lore characters.
Mother Gothel being a form of removal for Frank if he wanted to use it. It's one of those characters that you play, you can pay extra ink, and then return a chosen character to their player's hand.
And there we go, finally indicating we will banish the Bianca there, that challenger coming in handy.
Okay, so it looks like Frank is going to opt to play the Miss Bianca, or sorry, not the Miss Bianca, the Mother Gothel, and bounce the Orville back to Zan's hand, opting not to play the Gantu on this turn.
Protect that Arthur there a little bit.
I think trying to fish out any removal or interaction that Zan might have against this Arthur so that he can follow it up with the Gantu. And it looks like Zan is just going to concede the game, and Frank wins the first game of this super sealed.
As we mentioned, what an exciting match. I want to talk all about it in a moment, but I will highlight here for those coming in late. Players now have the opportunity to sideboard. They have their card pools from their sealed and able to work in any cards that they might want to based on their matchup. So Frank here taking a look at what options he has available, choosing what to sub in and sub out.
Yeah, I mean, as we mentioned, this whole weekend is just full of mental games, and if you thought looking through your opponent's deck list, trying to remember what they're playing, all the weird interactions that can happen in sealed, it gets even more complicated after game 1. Now you have to analyze, okay, what cards did I see Zan playing? Zan saying, what cards did I see Frank playing? Are there any cards in my deck that aren't super helpful right now? We noticed that Zan held onto that Bruni for a long time, an evasive character, I believe 4 cost, but it's only a 2/2. Frank was able to get a very, very strong opening on that first game. Evasive character after evasive character after evasive character. You know, if Zan has anything extra in his sideboard that he can use to pull in to maybe combat that, he may be looking at adding those cards in.
That's true. You know, something else I noticed in this match, it highlighted perfectly what we were talking about before with the lack of direct removal. You know, oftentimes in core constructed, we think about removal as cards like Dragonfire or Maleficent that directly banish a character, or cards like Along Came Zeus or Strength of Raging Fire that deal damage to a character to remove them outright. In this format, there's just not a lot of that available. There's a little, but there's not a lot. And so you're looking for tricky ways to do it. Cards that move damage counters. Cards that give your opponent's characters reckless and force them to challenge in. Cards that even bounce, using bounce as a form of removal, which we do see in core constructed, but extra important here. And that is super interesting as you watch these players figure out, you know, what's going on back and forth. And Frank, they're making, I think, one substitution today.
Yeah, I saw at least one. I don't know what card he took out and put back in, but at least making some substitutions, knowing that he's very likely on the draw for this game. But there's a card that he found may not be super useful to him against Zan's deck.
And look at the games, like Zan here, seeing that substitution made, now taking a look at Frank's list, trying to suss out what is that one card that Frank switched out? What is that one surprise that Frank might have that I'm not tracking?
Yeah, because Zan doesn't know, right?
No idea.
The deck lists that they're given are only checked on what the original deck was. So as we can see them looking through the deck list now of each of their opponent.
Yeah, and super interesting, to your point, Brandon, to notice how this format was done here. You can see on the table the deck list there. That represents the card pool that each player had to work with, and the players indicating which cards there were the ones they chose to bring into their deck.
Yeah, something like, it's not super easy to look through this deck list either. It's just the character names, right? So you have to have an understanding of what the cards actually do. The players are allowed to look at the card images if they need to during a portion like this, if they don't know what a card does and they want to know. But also, this is the entire pool, right? This isn't just the Amethyst, Steel, and Emerald cards that they chose from their pool. This is the Amber, Ruby, and Sapphire cards that aren't in there either. So you're kind of having to like sort through this, you know, papers long deck list, kind of work through on top of it, which can be a little bit difficult to notice some cards that you may not think of that you need to look out for.
Yeah, and you know, sometimes you watch these players and you wonder, hey, these are pro players. They're preparing for the biggest event. You know, they play Lorcana competitively. Like, shouldn't they know all these cards by name? And I'm gonna say, like, based on my experience as well, Brandon, because I know we studied for this.
Yes.
Immensely as well. There's 800 cards.
Yes.
800 plus cards in this card pool. These players can draw them, and for sure they're familiar with a lot of them from core constructed and cards that they played in starter decks or whatever. But that's a lot of cards to know off the top of your head.
Yeah.
And even being wrong about like Challenger 1 or Challenger 2, like not having that memorized correctly, can be huge.
Right, or not remembering if it's moving 1 damage counter or dealing 1 damage. You know, that could be all the difference. And I don't know, even if you take away some of the cards out of the past 4 sets, you think, okay, nobody would play this in sealed. There's still hundreds of cards to remember, and it would be difficult to remember. And even if these players practice super sealed, right? They bought packs at their LGS, and they opened them themselves, or they just went through the card pool and tried their best to simulate it. You know, I'm sure there's cards that stood out in testing for these guys that they're looking out for, but there's still going to be things that they didn't find or they didn't think of, interactions they may not be realizing that they have to look out for.
Yeah, both players taking a look here. Let's take a look. We have that audio there, 7 cost. We have that Twin Fire again.
Fire that Frank sent back initially.
Yeah.
The Hey Bodyguard. So if I'm Zan, I'm probably looking to have as explosive an opening as I can. We do have some higher cost characters in play. Yeah, Zan looking to send back, I think, 6 cards. There's one that he kept down. Our lowest cost character to play is a 3-drop. Yeah, Zan's going to send back 6, it looks like. We find a 2-drop, which is good.
Yep.
Oh, and a Legendary Rapunzel. Fun, and an evasive character. And Sisu, so a little bit better. I think we have some curve here for Zan. Also some removal with everybody has a weakness. We talked about that card earlier and how monumental that card can be in a situation where you need to come back from being behind.
Frank sending away 4 here. We see that Twin Fire head off as well as some of the high cost cards. Taking a look here now, I don't know that the game plan changes terribly much for each player. Now they'll change their game plan slightly versus whether on the player on the draw, but you know, we knew evasives would loom large here. Evasive did loom large in the early game here, so both players knowing, you know, they have to find that removal, those answers, perhaps get, you know, prioritize finding a low-cost evasive character themselves just as an answer to their opponent. Didn't see what Frank drew, but we'll get a look here shortly.
And it looks like Zan is go ahead and ink, missing that 1 drop. Move it over to Frank. Don't see a 1 drop for Frank either, so I imagine we're going to ink something and pass. Making Magic a form of removal, but one that we probably don't need right now, at least in the early part of the game. We're going to ink a Duchess for Zan here. No 2 drop either, choosing to ink that 2 drop, which is an interesting play.
It is an interesting play.
I think the reason for it is, we talk about resources in this game being so important. Zan saying, look, I'm happy to not play this 2 drop to keep an extra card in hand.
And I think being on the play, too, factors into that decision a little bit. If Frank was applying pressure on the play, you'd want to get something on the board to respond sooner. But given a little bit of space there, and now here we have the first character. It is that Orville again that we saw be very impactful next game. We did see that Bianca come down, so now Frank has to be careful about exposing his evasive characters.
Yeah, I like the Bambi being played by Frank here as well, a 3/2, 2-drop character. Just good. I like these 3/2, 2-drop characters because, as we see Zan play this Orville as a 4/3, Frank can pretty safely quest here with Bambi and say, look, if you want to get rid of this character with my Orville on the next turn, you can, but Orville is going to be banished in the process. Your 3-cost character is going to be banished by my 2-cost character, and he says, I'm happy with that.
Very favorable trade.
Go ahead and ink a Bucky. Oh, and play Don Carnage, first evasive of the game. Dual ink, Emerald Steel. Could have played a little bit into why Frank chose these ink colors. We do see a Genie, though, that Zan draws for the turn, which can be the exact counter that he needs for any evasive characters that Frank is playing. It is a little bit behind curve, I believe.
But this static ability on Don Carnage may loom large here. It says whenever you play an action that isn't a song chosen opposing character gains Reckless during their next turn. Frank now, with a couple actions available, we do see a Hypnotic Strength in hand, so it's a card that he could play later on. But now, Zan has to play around this a little bit. Any of his characters could gain Reckless and be forced into an unfavorable challenge, and Frank can also shut down certain characters from questing. So Don Carnage, if left there throughout the game, could do some shenanigans.
Yeah, and we see Frank is holding that Hypnotic Strength to use that Don Carnage. Zan playing the Genie on his last turn, not inking for turn, notably. Choosing to keep cards in hand instead, but getting that Genie in play that'll have evasive on his turn, sort of making it so that Frank is not incentivized to quest with this Don Carnage, because the Genie can banish the Don Carnage in a favorable trade.
Very favorable trade. Yeah, preventing those free, sneaky little evasive quests, those cheeky little quests, as I call them, super, super important.
Yeah, 1 lore might not look like a lot, but when it's 1 lore over the course of 5 turns, it starts to turn into a lot.
Yeah, Merlin Turtle going into the inkwell there. 4-cost card from Frank, it looks like.
It's like a Cusco potentially coming down, and it is.
Cusco, Panic Llama, 2/2 evasive.
2 lore evasive character, even more threatening than these 1 lore evasive characters. Frank deciding to quest with the Bambi here, opening up some potential trickery with Zan if he has any damage moving counters, because we can challenge with the Genie, then move some damage off, which we do with that Making Magic and the everybody has a weakness.
It's such a fun little challenge, isn't it? Because it presents what looks like a favorable trade, and you wonder, what has Frank got up his sleeve to take advantage of this? Zan here, he's going to take that bet. He's going to say, I will banish that, put 3 damage on my Genie.
And notably, we can do this a bit safer, too, because Miss Bianca entered play, which means Orville now will have evasive on our turn, or has evasive on our turn.
It's so interesting, when you look at these super sealed constructed formats, or any sealed format, you have to be careful when choosing to pursue some of these synergies, because if you devote a lot of cards to pursuing like a shift line or some sort of character type synergy, it could cost you if it doesn't pay off. But here, both times we've gotten value out of this Orville in terms of unlocking his ability with Miss Bianca. But the one thing to note here is there's less of a cost in pursuing the synergy, because Orville and Bianca are both pretty good bodies on their own for that ink slot. But used to maximum effect here, as Zan has been able to find both those characters on both games.
Yeah, and we just see the Cusco ability being used here by Frank Karsten. Has the ability at the start of your turn, choose one, each player draws a card, or each player chooses and discards a card, and Frank says, I like the cards in my hands, I don't want to discard them, so giving Zan a card, he's allowed to draw a card as well. We do see a March Hare being played, which has Rush, which is another form of removal.
You play this
Or
character.
sorry,
you
no.
2 damage to chosen damaged character. So that's exactly the line that Frank was playing.
Skill
into.
removal.
Skill removal. Yeah, inviting that challenge, saying you can leave that damaged character up. I've got this March hair. I can get maximum value out of it if I force you to damage one of your characters. Zan there, but here's the thing. Like you at some point you have to take that challenge, or you risk letting your opponent run away with free lore. If you've got it, you've got it. Frank had it, banishing that character there. One thing to note in the Cusco, it doesn't say you may. So at the start of each turn, Frank has to pick one, either both draw or both discard. And so it'll be interesting to see how he chooses to navigate that ability throughout this game.
You see Frank ink for turn, putting that Ariana, just a big 5/5 character, into the inkwell. Zan has a dock in hand. Interesting.
Dock, a fantastic card to draw extra cards. Made much more better when your hand is empty here. So not a card you want to use its ability on, but a great insurance policy to have in hand if Zan manages to empty out the rest of it, give him a couple cards in the late game.
Zan deciding to ink this Camillo Madrigal, playing out the Rapunzel, 2/5 evasive character with 2 lore.
Rapunzel, high climber, and she's a legendary foil. Beautiful card.
She has a unique ability as well.
Yeah, it's another one. It's similar to Reckless whenever this character quests. Chosen opposing character can't quest during their next turn. So a high willpower quester, they can usually get a quest in without serious repercussions, and then shuts down one of your opponent's quests next turn if they're rushing ahead.
You see Mother Gothel sitting in Frank Karsten's hand, the 6 drop. We may be looking to play this turn if we can ink up to it.
This board state is starting to develop here. Both players with characters that they don't necessarily want to make vulnerable here. And there is that Mother Gothel.
There's a Mother Gothel. Zan's going to have to choose a character to put back into his hand.
Yeah, it's such a tempo killer.
We'll see if Zan... It's a tough spot, because if you bring back the Bianca or the Orville, you kind of lose that, one of your evasive characters. If you just play this Rapunzel, you don't want to bring it back. Another evasive character, one with a unique ability in that you can stop an opponent character from questing when she quests. Puts Zan in a pretty tight position here. No real easy decision.
Yeah, looks like we're considering the Bianca. That'll leave Orville available to challenge if we play the Bianca immediately, but it does cost 5. Tough decision here.
Also notably, this is before Frank is questing with anything, so Zan's saying, if you pull back one of these characters and remove some of your evasives, then maybe I feel happy questing with mine and forcing you to play Bianca on the next turn, so Orville can have evasive.
We did send the Bianca back to hand.
Frank considering here if he wants to quest with any of these characters for the turn. Looks like he's going to quest with the March here. Pretty safe to do so, because if the Orville challenges, then both characters get banished.
And that Orville is an evasive answer, so Frank happy, I think, for that trade.
And of course, the Rapunzel can't banish the March here either with only 2 strength, at least not without some sort of combat trick.
And I'm trying to look, there are some combat tricks. You see that Pain in hand, I think. And there's a Zazu off the top deck. Some other fun cards here. There's a Hades in hand, a TikTok. There's a lot of late game big character answers there. Zan
Also, I think Zan has a Restoring the Crown in hand, which could be a really great comeback card. It makes Frank exert all of his characters, and then when one of Zan's characters banishes another character in a challenge, he gains 2 lore. So you can kind of clean up the board really quickly and gain a bunch of lore while doing so.
Yeah, it's a great card to have in hand in a game, in a format where oftentimes those board states do become extended. You end up building up quite the board state before closing things out. If you force all your opponent's characters to exert, you can clean them up pretty efficiently on your terms. Zan here playing that TikTok again, getting it on the board. It's a big body, it's a big challenger, and I think Zan's game plan here, if he can extend his board a little bit more, get some of these big challengers in play, there can be an incredibly impactful turn if Zan does play that Answering the Crown. Yeah, to allow him to clean things up pretty well.
I think that's definitely what he's moving towards. Just building up this massive characters that can challenge evasive characters for a turn, surprising Frank Karsten. But Frank is, sort of playing around that by playing the Mother Gothel last turn, forcing Zan to bounce character back to his hand, so that it at least delays Zan a turn on a play like that. But we are going to pass it over to Frank. He's going to ready everything. Activate Cusco's ability, so both players, he chooses for both players to draw a card, and then he'll draw a card per turn. Having a healthy amount of cards in hand to choose from, he can continue to ink really safely, maybe start playing multiple characters out at a time.
So many options available.
We also have access to that Hypnotic Strength. We could play it on our Don Carnage, give something reckless on the next turn, and then use it to banish this Rapunzel. Our Don Carnage would be banished as well, but could be a tricky play here. We also have another basic card through Genie, Wish Fulfilled in Frank Karsten's hand.
Yeah, so many options, Frank, thinking it through.
I missed. Looks like the Rapunzel quested last turn, so
It did.
one of Frank's characters can't quest during his turn.
It's the Mother Gothel.
Okay. We are considering this Hypnotic Strength from Frank here. Going to choose the Don Carnage, so it'll have Challenger +2, and Frank gets to draw a card.
Yeah, importantly, it also unlocks Don Carnage's ability.
Yeah, because it is an action. It is not a song. It's going to choose Orville to have Reckless on Zan's next turn, or at least looking at it. Drew General Lee off the top there. Pretty standard character with Resist. And we are going to use that Don Carnage to banish the Rapunzel here, making it a clean trade.
Very favorable trade there, and that Orville not being able to quest boot, just a fun little bonus. But you know, you watch Frank and some of these players here setting up these plays in the early game. You know, those characters sitting around for 2, 3, 4, 5 turns until the moment that they can be used to maximum effect. Great play there, set up all the way back on turn 2.
Frank inking him out of Mim here, playing a 5-cost character. Oh, do we have a TikTok of our own? We do.
Oh, it is a TikTok. You tick, I talk. Here comes the crocodile to answer yours.
It's another one of those awkward situations where it's like, okay, now we have characters that don't trade super well, but Zan does find a library.
Fantastic card in this format. Unfortunately, it's at a point where Frank has managed to accumulate a fairly healthy amount of strength on his board, so Frank able to answer that library quickly. But a card that can set up a significant card draw or force an answer from Frank if you play it at the exact right time. But instead, we're going to see that Hades come down. It's a 3-lore quester, 3/4, Lord of the Dead during your opponent's turn. Whenever one of your other characters is banished, you gain 2 lore. At this point, it's a high quester, and it forces your opponent to give you a little bit of lore every time that they do a little bit of control. Fun character to have sitting on the board there at this point in the game.
Yeah, one of the more difficult things to do, especially in a limited format, is you try to keep board control as best as you can, but then by the time you get it, sometimes your opponent's too far ahead in lore for it to really matter. We kind of saw that happen in the first game where Frank had such a lore lead, and with Hades in play right now, this sort of makes it so that Zan can challenge on his turn, keep control of the board, and then if Frank wants to challenge back, he's going to also allow Zan to keep up with him in his lore lead, so puts Frank in a little bit of a difficult position here unless we can get rid of this Hades, but not sure what removal options we have for Frank right now.
There's some interesting ones. Importantly, there's a whale of a card in his hand, Monstro, a card with Rush that you can ready numerous times by discarding cards in your hand. Frank's setting up that play by drawing so many cards off that Cusco. If Zan exerts numerous characters, that Monstro can clean things up pretty effectively.
Yeah, especially since we're able to draw extra cards every turn with this Cusco in play. Makes it so that we have cards in hand to discard, but Frank considering inking for the turn. Dividing up his ink, it looks like we're going to exert 7 here to play that Adia.
Adia again, that 7/7/3 quester. It's a great finisher for Frank. It's so much willpower to remove, and it hits hard when you challenge into it. So a card that Frank can be used for board control or to push his lore total.
Yeah, now we're getting to a point for Zan where Frank is accumulating so much just lore on characters on his side of the board that we got to do something about them quickly, because I think we have 8 lore total on Frank's side of the board, which means, if we wanted to, we could quest with all of our characters next turn, assuming these are all of them stay on board, pushing Frank up to 16. So Zan is really put in a position where he needs to do something about these characters in play to slow Frank down a little bit.
Yeah, to your point, Frank is setting up a single game-ending turn here at this point with 8 lore on board. He can go all the way up to 16, couple more characters, and he could have a turn one turn win. So yeah, Zan having to think about controlling a little bit, trying to get something off the board to prevent Frank from just getting game state in ready characters. Of course, Zan has a couple tricks up his sleeve as well in that regard. We'll see if we can make use of them, though.
Yeah, one thing that I'm noticing from the cards in Zan's hand is they're just lacking interaction. We have like Pluto, which is a bodyguard, Doc, which lets you draw some extra cards. We have everybody has a weakness, but there's not a whole lot of damage counters on individual characters to really utilize that very well. And Frank is doing a great job of not exerting characters that Zan can challenge with his that will survive that challenge to create damage counters. But it does look like Zan is going to play out this Pluto, which can enter exerted because he's a bodyguard. He's a 5/5 when he doesn't have damage on him. And following it up with the Miss Bianca, which he can play for 4 ink instead of 6 because he has an ally character in play, just going super wide here.
Trying to get as much strength, as much value on the board as possible this turn.
I think really trying to set up that restoring the crown turn, because if we can get that card off, we can challenge and banish a bunch of Frank Karsten's characters. He can catch up in lore and gain board control. It could be the swing that Zan needs to stay in this game.
Zan doing the math here, trying to figure out where things are likely to be traded. That Pluto, of course, invites a favorable challenge, but at this point in the game, Zan thinking, I need to question my things, and I need to go for it. I need to push my lore total. If that Pluto is banished, he'll get to lure off that Hades, so trying to push his lore totally different, maybe perhaps force Frank into the control role. There are some favorable trades available for Frank, but if Frank's taking the turn off from questing and challenging in, giving Zan some free lore in the process, and at this point saying I will take that trade, at some point I have to make my move. But Frank, with plenty of fun answers in his hand, we'll see which way he chooses to go.
Yeah, I think this is a very interesting turn for Frank here. We're playing the genie, drawing a card, but the reason I say it's interesting is because if Frank decides to push for the lore, Zan has set himself up to gain a ton of lore on the next turn for restoring the crown. The only evasive character in play currently is this Cusco, so if Zan plays restoring the crown on the next turn, he exerts all of Frank's characters. For every character that Zan banishes on Frank's side of the board, he gains 2 lore. So the more characters that Frank plays, trying to push up to this 20 or create this critical mass of lore on board, maybe the worse it is actually for him, because Zan might be able to use that against him and come ahead. Frank deciding what he wants to do with the rest of his ink for the turn, or if he wants to start making trades.
This is a fascinating turn here.
This is where we see these pros at work. We talk about the cards you have to consider from your opponent after looking at their deck list. Frank may well understand what Zan is trying to set up here. We're going to ink the Monstro for turn. Exerting for ink. Playing a pain, it looks, or panic. To move some damage counters. We're going to move 2 damage counters off of the TikTok onto the Pluto.
Pluto, of course. Pluto's ability, his extra strength only activates when he doesn't have damage. So now he's just a 1/5.
Yeah, it's going to make it a lot tougher for Zan to make favorable trades here. Yeah, and Frank Karsten is just questing out.
Inviting an answer.
Up 8 lore to 16. We'll see what Zan has to work with.
What a tricky play with that damage counter. Just slide that over, and now you're right. That's 4 strength gone. That Zan no longer has available. Let's see. Zan does have some tricky cards, but it's just, I mean, when you look at that willpower, there's just so much to get through with damage-based removal. And unfortunately, Frank already has game on the board with ready characters there. 4 characters, or 4 lore between that panic and that genie. So Zan will not only have to deal with these exerted characters, but find a way to give those ready characters reckless, to do something to keep them from questing next turn.
Yeah, Frank has put Zan in a position of you have to have it or else you lose. Because as we know from the previous game, Frank won game 1. So if Frank wins this one, he'll move into round 2 with a victory. Zan moving cards around, just trying to figure out how he can divvy up these challenges to get rid of everything. Seeing if he even has the the stats on board to challenge and banish everything cleanly.
That Pluto losing its strength looms really large here. Still might not have been enough, but man, it'd be nice to have that available.
And like one thing to note, Frank has 6 characters on his side of the board. Zan only has 5, so even if we are able to find a way to exert Panic and Genie, you know, we can only make 5 challenges essentially.
We'll need some tricks.
Zan just looking through his cards in hand, seeing what his options are, how to play out this turn to stay in this game.
I mean, in the first round of one of the biggest tournaments of your life, you look for every out. You look at every option. Perhaps by moving things around, there's something you hadn't considered. So you start to align things. You take a look. Where can I get the best value here? Where can I possibly make this work? Orville will finally settle on that challenge, get that Cusco off the board.
Capturing the Bianca to the Mother Gothel.
Looks like we've settled on that. That'll be 5 damage there.
Are we setting up?
We have some tricks.
Some tricks here. There's that card we've been talking about. Everybody's
got a weakness.
Everybody's got a weakness. We're going to move 1 damage counter off of all of our characters onto one of Frank's characters. So we have just enough to banish his Genie, and then Zan gets to draw 4 cards.
Now, he's going to be able to look for answers. He's going to be able to look for other cards. Getting one of those ready characters off the board. What a play. That card has been sitting in his hand all game, looking to make a difference. Here it is coming into play. Now, it may not be enough still, but getting one of those characters off the board and at least giving yourself a chance with some extra cards. Fantastic play there. What a card to have in this moment.
Definitely gives Zan an opportunity to look for outs and to stay in this game. We still have to get rid of some characters on board, though, as Frank only needs 4 more lore to win on the next turn. Which means we got to get rid of Mother Gothel and Adia.
3 characters left to challenge. We did draw 4 cards. I didn't get a look at all of them. They went by very fast. Let's see. 3 ink.
We're going to play...
Sapphire Coil there.
Is it Pixie Dust?
It's a Sapphire Coil.
Or Amethyst? Amethyst Coil.
I'm sorry, Amethyst Coil. Colors are hard.
Greg taking a moment to read what Amethyst Coil does. Says during your turn, whenever a card is put in your inkwell, you can move 1 damage counter from chosen character to a chosen opposing character. So you see him do that to the Mother Gothel here. To clean up the Mother Gothel, we are going to take Pluto and TikTok just to banish this Adia.
And what happened there, I think that wasn't enough, so we slid a damage counter in the process as cards were banished to finish off that Adia.
We're going to play a dock. Is Zan going to get rid of his hand and draw 2 cards, or keep them there? I think he's just trying to get characters on board, it looks like. Knowing he has to gain lore quickly, we're going to quest for 3 with this Hades here. We move it over to Frank. Frank has plenty of cards in hand to play out. Zan made it past the last turn. I'm sure Frank he's going to present game again and force Zan to have it again. Is that a Mufasa?
It is.
Mufasa in hand?
Among the Stars, fantastic card. But, I mean, it can't quest right away, so either way, he's going to go back over to Zan. And Zan now, going up to 10 ink, you got to look at the number, 10 lore. Looking at lore on the board, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If Zan has tricks, there's things that could possibly close out this game. So Frank now trying to figure out how do I put game on board and not give my opponent something, allow them to close it out before it gets back over to me. Going to get the full quest here, go up to 19. Mufasa Among the Stars, such a powerful card in any format if you can get it on the board.
If you can get it on the board and it stays around, looks like Frank is considering it. We are going to see Mufasa enter play. He's going to ink for the turn, followed up with a General Lee. Just another character on board that has to be dealt with. Only 1 lore, but has resist.
But that 1 lore is enough right now. And now 2 characters with resist in play. Mufasa, a 5/7 with resist 1 and evasive.
This is going to be tough for Zan to get out of. lot of interaction, at least with stuff on board in Zan's hand right now. There's ways to draw cards. There's ways to gain lore through Cobra.
Slide a damage counter around.
Can move a damage counter when we ink, spam with this coil. Zan doing some math here, figuring out, okay, is there a way that I can either make it out of this or win this turn? TikTok having a huge body, 5'6". Panic having that 2 lure that needs to be got rid of. Are we going to see Restoring the Crown being played?
There it is.
We are. Restoring the Crown will be played, so Frank will have to exert all of his characters. And when Zan banishes one of Frank's characters, he gains 2 lore. So 8 lore on the table right now just through challenges for for Zan here, challenging Frank's characters. Doing some math, challenging with the Orville, and he has the Cobra for the extra last 2 lore.
Let's see.
Is this enough to make it out?
I mean,
he can banish the Panic with the Orville. He's choosing Miss Bianca to banish the General Lee. That's 4.
Just that resist is so challenging on that Mufasa.
Okay, so we're going to get rid of the Panic. That's 2 lore gain for Zan here. Miss Bianca choosing to banish the General Lee. Another 2 lore. Doc is going to quest for 1. Hades is going to quest for 4, and that's going to be enough.
That's the Cobra. Did that do
Zan
it?
finds a way out.
Oh, my
Winning
goodness.
game 1. Oh, my goodness.
You know, sometimes these creep up on you. I was Brandon, I was looking at this game for several turns, thinking there's no way out of this. The board state is too high. There's too much, and eventually Zan pushing himself just high enough that he had the tricks to close it out. That was one of those that was an incredible victory.
Yeah. I mean, we see just how important some of these cards that we've mentioned earlier, these comeback cards are. Zan being able to play that everybody's got a weakness, to draw 4 cards into his deck, find some more answers, give him opportunities for things to ink, to use that Amethyst Coil, or I think he found the Amethyst Coil out of that card, and then holding on to that, the Return of the Crown card to utilize in the perfect moment right here. It was basically his only answer for Frank, had just enough characters on board, just enough lore to put Frank in a position where, you know, Frank, turn after turn, kept telling Zan, hey, you have to have it or else I take this game. And Frank said, it'll take a couple turns, but I can set it up. And that's exactly what he did.
That game was a masterclass in navigating this format, in removing just the right amount of things, making just the right amount of things vulnerable, and setting up a game-winning play with some key cards. A lot of, as you pointed out, Zan had a lot of those cards for many, many turns in trying to find out the exact right moment to use them to maximize value, whether you use them for control or for your own benefit to push your lore, and just an incredible sequence of turns there for Zan to close that thing out. And Frank, I'm sure, kind of shaking his head inside, thinking, I don't know how that game got away from me.
Yeah, I mean, I would be a little disappointed if I were Frank, to be honest. For presenting game win turn after turn, Frank's deck, for the cards we've seen, is a very powerful deck, one that has lots of evasives, lots of interaction, ways to bounce characters back from your on your opponent's side of the board, sort of undoing the turn that they just did, and ways to give characters reckless so that they can't quest, or that they're forced to make unfavorable trades, evasive characters that you can use to pile up lore turn after turn, and then finish with big cards like Adiana, questing for 3 lore. I can't believe that Frank didn't make it out of that game with a victory, but we are going to go to this game 3. This is just round 1, Liam. We're going to a game 3, looking at these players' hands and what they're altering. They only have about 20 or 15 minutes left in this round.
I mean, that is incredible. I just one more. I can't imagine a better game of Super Sealed, a better game of Lorcana Limited than the one we just watched. And it's only game 2. It's just going to go uphill from here. This game, though, it is on the line. Both players need to take this game to win. Frank, having won game 1, will be on the play again this turn, able to be aggressive, push that lore total, what an amazing way to start the weekend.
Both players are going to want to be playing with pace as well, as it's very advantageous for them to walk away from this with a win instead of a draw. They don't have that much time.
There they go. Sideboard available again. I don't know if either player sideboarded there or not. I kind of missed it as I was waving in here. So both players happy with their deck in that instance then. I'm trying to scan this list to try to intuit what card Frank rotated in, because I want to know, but can't quite see it.
We're going to get right into this third game. Jim Hawkins being inked.
Both players moving with pace, knowing that time could be an issue.
Yeah, 10 minutes, 30 seconds left on the clock. They have to go fast.
We're going to try to keep up.
Playing a Mr. Smee on turn 2, just getting a character out on board. Every game, Frank has been able to be the first player to get a character out. It's been to his advantage for most games, getting a little bit of a lore lead. Early on in Game 1, he's able to finish that lore lead out. Game 2, Zan had every card he needed to come back.
Frank really liking this 3-2 stat line in the 2-drop here. It's the second time we've seen him play. And this character, again, is an evasive answer if Zan manages to get an early evasive character on the board. Look at that. And also the 5th Spirit. That card's going to loom large in the late game. A fantastic removal option for Zan.
Some more basic characters with Zazu as well. This is the toughest part about playing sealed here. They're crunched for time, and every card can matter. We saw how in Game 2, Zan held on to some comeback cards for a long time that were key to victory for him. But when you're crunched on time, it's hard to know what's safe to ink, what isn't. Zan struggling a little bit on that turn just to ink something and play something. I think it was a Bambi. Yeah, we get a Bambi out there. So if Frank quests with this Mr. Smee, the Bambi can challenge back and stop him. Looks like Frank is considering inking this Louise. Another form of removal, but not something Frank needs right now. I think Frank's just trying to keep the game in his control. We're going to see a White Rabbit being played. Just a well-statted character, 3-4 with 1 lore, no abilities. We are going to go ahead and quest with Smee here, gaining the first lore of the game.
Yeah, Frank indicating he wants to be the beatdown role. He wants to be the aggressor, accumulate that lore total, forcing Zan into the response. White Rabbit, again, yeah, very well statted. And the answer is the Amethyst Coil there. A tricky little card. We talked about the importance of removal. Sliding damage counters around every single turn can be incredibly impactful, especially since we've seen that Zan has cards that care about where damage counters are placed. And that can be super helpful. Here's that tricky Kuzco again there. Kuzco Panic Llama. It's a card that Frank used to great effect last game to draw a bajillion cards, giving Zan a bajillion in the process. But we see Frank pretty confident in his endgame, so one of his game plans here is just get to that high ink total. And Gizmo Duck coming down on Zan's side of the board. Interesting card, 4 strength in the 4 slot, but resist 1 card that can challenge pretty effectively, and tricky to remove on that with that resist.
Yeah, I would be a little bit concerned if I was Zan here, seeing that evasive character interplay for Frank Kuzco. Also just allowing Frank to give both player cards for turn, but one of the things that makes this Kuzco good outside of it just being an evasive character with 2 lore is that you get to see your card first. You get to draw your card first and use something with it. So Zan is going to need an answer for these evasive characters. We've seen Frank had a ton of evasive characters in his deck that he's been able to utilize over the past 2 games.
Yeah, I think a little pause there. I think they were having a discussion about something.
About Kuzco's ability, I imagine, but Frank inking for turn. Exerting 5. Oh, we're going to play the Mother Gothel. Bounce the Gizmo Duck. This is a huge tempo play from Frank here. Zan not having any characters on board. Frank's just able to freely quest with everything he has, pushing his lore even further, basically completely undoing the last turn that Zan did. This is not something Zan wants to see here in Game 3. But we do come back with the Elsa, exerting, getting rid of that Kuzco, getting rid of the evasive character.
Yeah, a fantastic series by both players. Bouncing card back hand, forcing your opponent to do it all again is huge. But the Elsa the 5th Spirit, a fantastic card in Core Constructed. You love to find it here in Sealed, and getting rid of that Kuzco is fantastic. I mean, what a swing there back and forth.
See how back and forth these Sealed games can go. Very unpredictable because of the card pool. Frank inking for turn, going for 6, playing that Mother Gothel, or bouncing the Elsa back, saying, if you want to play it again, you can. There's nothing on my side of the board you can banish. Just with that, though, might be able to banish the Mother Gothel when we move some damage counters around, but that's a pretty slow turn for Zan. Frank just keeping cards off of Zan's side of the board so he can keep questing. Zan's going to opt for the Pete being played. Just a big character, 5/5 with 2 lore. Pirate when he's exerted. I believe his pirates gain resist.
That's true, including himself.
Go ahead and just quest out here for Frank, gaining 4 lore. Frank says, this match is mine. I'm in the driver's seat.
Frank on the play here, just driving that lore total, forcing Zan in response. And Zan just not able to establish really much of anything with his Mother Gothels and all of their bouncy shenanigans. Let's see, Frank probably wants to develop something else here.
Frank taking a little bit more time on this turn, inking the Aria.
Playing
Mufasa, and there we see it. That huge evasive character we saw last game.
It's 7 cost. It also has resist 1, makes it very difficult to remove. It's evasive resists. I mean, this is this could be the game ender.
It could be. Just looking at Zan's hand momentarily, there's not anything that I see that can directly get rid of it. I mean, we have the Elsa to exert it, but we need evasive characters to challenge. That Zazu that's evasive in his hand is only a 3/5, I believe, so going to be difficult to get through as well. I believe we do have everybody has a weakness as well, but you're only moving, damage counters in that sense. Mufasa having 7 willpower. When you move damage counters, it gets around the resist, but I mean, I can't think of a scenario where Zan's going to have 7 individual characters with damage counters on them to use that, effectively. You'd need something else.
And, really highlighting here the power of these Mother Gothels, in this format, especially when you're on the play. Because any card that gives you an effect, some sort of removal effect, especially when you also establish a body on the board, get a card into play and can develop your board, is huge. So this here, being able to play Mother Gothel, establish a 2-cost character while removing one of your opponents, it's a 2-character swing, and that is incredibly... It hurts your game plan when you're on the control, and it allows you to just race ahead. Gosh, I mean, both of those cards in sequence, really, really difficult.
We talk about how important certain things in Sealed is. Evasives, we see how well Frank is utilizing his evasive characters to gain a lead and removal, no matter the form, whether that's moving damage counters or bouncing characters back to hand. Especially great if you can undo that tempo, like you mentioned, with these Mother Gothels. And we just see Frank building up a big board while Zan is having trouble with anything sticking. Yeah, so it looks like he's looking to challenge the Mother Gothel with the Pete, moving, and then move a damage counter after inking with the Amethyst Coil. See that happen here.
Play here. Yeah, there it is. Gives Moto into the Inkwell. We'll slide that damage counter over, exactly as you said, Brandon. Get that Mother Gothel off the board. Zan just trying to slow down that lore gain now. Great challenge there.
Play Zazu out. Just evasive character, 3/5 with 2 lore. I think Zan trying to get stuff into play that we can maybe use to banish this Mufasa, because if we can't stop this Mufasa soon, Frank might be able to steal the lead away, but it does look like Frank is pretty low on cards in hand.
So looks like that Mufasa is not lying around. It's going to quest there and get a couple lore.
The main threat on Frank's side of the board here. Frank is going to continue to play characters on board. Put lore on board at 15 lore. I think we have enough for Frank here that Zan is required to banish some characters this turn, which he definitely can do.
Keep it under control. Now, this is a tough board state. That Mufasa looms really large. However, keep in mind, last game, there was a point in the game where we thought it was all over, and Zan managed to claw his way back. So plenty of tricks in this deck, but this for sure is an intimidating position to be in.
Yeah, Zan had some critical comeback cards in his hand for last game. I'm not sure if he has them now. Start by inking a card, moving a damage counter from Pete onto the Mufasa, getting around that resist.
Yeah, resist prevents damage, but it doesn't affect moving damage counter, so a sneaky way to get around that ability. Get a couple challenges there.
Yeah, we're going to challenge I think we challenged some other Gothel with the Zazu. Challenge with Pete.
Let's see what the answer
with
is.
the White Rabbit. Okay, so this is a delay. Bruno Madrigal choosing Mufasa, meaning that Mufasa cannot ready at Frank's next turn. And we are going to see that everybody has regrets. Or sorry, everybody has a weakness. Moving some damage counters over to Mufasa. I believe Zan drew 2 cards there.
Again, fascinating turn, slows things down. Bruno seeing into the future and saying, your future is you're going to stay exerted during your next turn. So if you can't remove it, at least make it so it can't quest. Frank here answering up with a Madam Mim. Looks like we're going to get a quest out of the Walrus here. Get another lure up to 16.
Yeah, Frank just slowly trying to climb his way to 20. If he can just get there, he's out of gas in hand. Zan really needing some answers to gain control over this board, and then we'll continue to need them thereafter. Moving some cards to the side, figuring out, can we get rid of this Mufasa this turn? Our Zazu can challenge and deal 2 damage to the Mufasa. Kind of ironic. Can move some damage counters here with Making Magic. We're going to move 1 to the Mufasa. We can deal 2 with Zazu. Then when we ink for turn, we can move another from the Amethyst Coil.
That'll be it.
So we can get rid of Mufasa. We can banish the Mufasa this turn. It's going to come at a cost. Do a lot of cards.
And look at the work that Amethyst Coil has put in this match, sliding damage around, getting rid of several characters efficiently. Fantastic card.
now that we've gotten Foss off of the board, the biggest thing we're concerned about, we still are going to have to be able to interact with other cards that Frank plays on his turn. Thankfully for Zan, I'm sure has only had one lore characters to play. But even the Walrus, it has 6 willpower, which means that this Pete can't cleanly banish it on its own.
It's interesting lining up Pete there against a ready character. Interesting what that might entail. That's what it entails. That Elsa coming down, we knew it was in hand. It got bounced earlier, exerting that Walrus, and we're going to have Bruno there challenge into the Walrus, remove it, then Pete and Elsa challenging in, to the Madam M, and now into the Walrus. What a play. Look at that. All of a sudden, we've slid damage around, done some shenanigans. That Mufasa.
Oh my goodness.
As well as everything else.
Frank top decks a Genie.
What an amazing card to draw in this scenario. Not only does it give him another
and
card,
a Don Carnage.
and both on, was that 1-2? 2 evasive characters on board now. They're both going to be ready. So not only do we need to be able to remove ready characters, we have to be able to remove evasive characters. That's not enough to close out the game now. That's only 3 more.
Only 3.
Still,
so Zane might have 2 turns if Frank just keeps everything in play right now. But what 2 cards to pull off the top of the deck?
It's just 1-2. That's fantastic here. So,
and notably, we do still have Elsa in play that does have evasive. So if this Don Carnage quests or exerts for any reason, if Elsa stays in play, then she can banish the Don Carnage, but does he want to banish these characters before they even get the opportunity to quest, or at least bounce them back to hand or something?
That's a King of Hearts, picky ruler.
King of Hearts, a Hey being played as a bodyguard. I think Zan's just playing everything out to board.
Maybe seizing this moment, choosing to push his lore total. King of Hearts says that damaged characters can't challenge your characters, so Frank now not able to answer that. Probably not something he's looking at doing here anyway, but that ability may loom large. We see a TikTok there in hand, a card that we've seen every game so far, and Frank having another one there, big body.
Yeah, I mean, Frank is in a position where we can quest for 3 here, play the TikTok. Zan doesn't have any cards in hand, so he's going to be required to find an answer off the top. Presenting win. Is Frank going to walk away with this, or will Zan find the answer?
Let's see, this top deck looms really large right here. We're gonna ready everything. Let's take a look at what we draw.
Missed what it
I got it
was.
quick. It's a magic. I honestly sometimes I wish I could yell in this moment, knowing whether it's good or bad. It's a magical making magic. Yeah. We were talking about how some of these cards, we don't see very often. Making magic one, we're not familiar with. We'll wait for it to come up. Move 1 damage counter from chosen character, chosen opposing character, and draw a card. So not a terrible card off the top deck. You can slide a damage counter around, do some shenanigans, but also you get another card, another chance to find an answer that you need. So not a terrible card off the top deck. Zan still has outs here.
Yeah, not enough to stop Frank, though. We need a way to banish every character in play, including this TikTok, which is a 5/6. So although moving damage counters is good, you're going to need more than just 1 or 2.
But there's plenty of cards Zan has in his deck. If he draws again, they can give Reckless. They can make characters not able to quest. There's things that we can do to shut down this lore gain, perhaps. So Zan trying to figure out. But here's the challenge. Zan has to think about right now what cards in his deck, what his outs are, because he has to choose to move that damage counter, considering what his outs may be, and in order to get that card and see what it is. So right now, trying to figure out exactly how he would assign things, what out he's looking for, and trying to figure out where he should place that damage counter with making magic appropriately.
Also notable, making magic is a 3-cost card. Not sure exactly how much ink Zan has, but even if we do find a card off the top, it'll have to be cheap enough to play.
That if we sign that Pete there.
No, this is magical.
Now 1 at a time. The time at the top was running the entire time. It doesn't account for judge calls and things like that. So
magical
judges
maneuvers.
have magical maneuvers. That's different.
Zan extends a hand and Frank.
No out.
Frank's going to take game around 1 in a 3-game match. Moving on with a 1-0 record.